Okay, so now we're going to look at shutter speed and its relation to motion blur. At a beginner's level, looking at the shutter speed is going to make sure you've got nice sharp pictures, but as you go on and become more advanced, it's going to take your pictures from being just a simple photograph into being a work of art. This is going to be really exciting and it's going to take your photos to a new level. So let's start by looking to see what shutter speed is. If I take the lens off the camera and we look inside, we can see this mirror here, and this mirror lifts up and down, and actually just behind here we've got the shutter, but you can't really see it. So as I click down, you see the shutter goes up and down. And if I set to a slower shutter speed, you can see the shutter comes up, it stays up for a while, and then it comes down. So what does this mean? Obviously, the longer the shutter is up, the more light that is going to get into the camera. So if we're in a dark room and we lift the shutter open, we can still get a nice exposure. So now a quick shutter speed would be, say, 1,000th of a second. At this speed, water is going to be nice and sharp. But if we start coming down to a slow shutter speed, we're looking at 1 second, 2 seconds, and even around 30 seconds, we're going to have a very slow shutter. Different cameras will have different maximum shutter speeds. For example, my D750 here has a 1/4000th of a second maximum shutter speed. As you go up you can get 1/10,000th of a second, but for me 1/4000th is plenty. Now if we look at the slower shutter speeds, most cameras usually go down to 30 seconds, and then they also usually have a bulb option. This basically means you can hold the shutter down as long as you like. So now let's take a deeper look at this and we'll see what the positives and negatives are of a fast and slow shutter speed. Now to start off, we're going to look at fast shutter speeds. Typically, you're going to want the fastest shutter speed as possible. As long as whatever you're taking a picture of is in focus, a fast shutter speed will make sure it's not blurred. Now the reason for this is the shutter goes up and down so quick, the camera cannot take in a lot of information. So to get a picture of the object, in what position it is in that moment in time. Now if we're looking for reasons for wanting a fast shutter, we could be looking at things like taking pictures of sports cars, taking pictures of people running or playing sports. We can look at water, for example, if we want waves crashing against a rock. We want to capture it nice and sharp. A fast shutter speed is essential for this. Now personally, I would classify a slow shutter speed as anything slower than 1/60th of a second. Now the reason for this is because if I've got a standard lens on my camera, I can use 1/60th of a second and hold the camera still and still get a sharp picture. Anything slower than this speed, the chances are the picture will start to blur. This is called camera shake, and camera shake basically happens because the shutter is open for a longer period of time. If you move your camera, it's going to take in information from everywhere it's looking. I personally find it easier to look at it as the camera is taking a lot of pictures and putting them all together on top of each other. So now I'm going to go outside and I'm going to set the camera to a slow shutter speed. I'm going to shoot this one at 1/15th of a second and I'm going to move my camera as I take the picture. So just remember, when I'm taking these pictures, I'm making the aperture smaller. This will correct the exposure. If you're having trouble doing this, just set your camera to shutter priority and the camera should take care of this for you. Now, if we look at the final result, it's very blurred. We don't want this at all. If I move the camera across and I take several pictures at a faster shutter speed, you can see each individual picture is nice and sharp, and then if I pile them all on top of each other, we've got a bit of a messy picture. And basically, this is what the camera has done in the slow shutter. It's compressed all these pictures together to make a blurred one. To stop this happening, this is where people would usually use a tripod. It's essential to keep the camera still to stop it moving, and then even if we take lots of different pictures and put them all on top of each other, it will still be sharp because they're all the same picture. So if we can avoid it, why would we use the slow shutter? It can have a really nice artistic effect. Now we've all seen these pictures of these cars going along and all their headlights being blurred. This is a slow shutter. So as the car moves across the picture and the shutter is open, the camera is going to see where the headlights move all the way across. However, where the car's a lot darker than the headlights, the car itself won't be picked up. It's like taking 100 pictures and then pushing them all together into one, and you can see everywhere the car's been. Now it's really important to remember to take a picture like this. The camera needs to be sitting on a still surface. A tripod would be ideal for this, and this means that whilst the car is blurred, the background will be sharp because we've taken away the camera shake. If we go back to our little chart, we can see here at 1,000th of a second a person running is going to be nice and sharp. Then as we go down through the shutter speeds, we can see that when we get to half a second, the person's going to be particularly blurred. Now there's different things that are going to affect the motion blur at different shutter speeds. For For example, if I've got a wide angled lens on, I can probably hold the camera still at 1/60th of a second. If I put a 300mm lens on that camera, I'm going to need a much faster shutter speed, maybe about 1/400th of a second. So the further you zoom in, the more motion blur you're likely to get, so you need a faster shutter speed for the longer lens. If we look at this logically, it makes sense. If we zoom in and we move the camera a very small amount, it's going to move where the picture is massively. If we zoom out and we move the camera a small amount, it's far less noticeable. Another thing to bear in mind if we're taking a picture on a tripod and something's moving, the speed at which it's moving will affect what shutter speed we want. So if we want to blur somebody walking, for example, I like to shoot about 1/30th or 1/20th of a second. If they're further away, you may need it even slower still. Now if you want to take a picture with a car in and you want the car to be blurred, if you're shooting on the motorway, you could probably get away with 1/125th of a second and the car will still be slightly blurred. If you shoot them slower at a 60th a second or a 30th a second, the car will be more blurred. Now if the car is moving slower for any reason, you will need a slower shutter speed again. The best way to find this thing out is just to go out and give it a go. So if you want to practice some fast shutter speeds, a great way to do this is if you've got pets, you can try to get a picture of them running nice and sharp, or even just take a picture of some cars moving and try to get a nice sharp picture. If you don't want to leave the house, you can even just try running the tap and trying to get the water nice and sharp. You should be able to do this at 1/1000th of a second. If you wanted to practice using some slow shutter speeds, usually going out at night time is going to be beneficial for this. Again, cars moving with the blurred lights is always a really nice shot. I personally like trying to get pictures of waterfalls and things, but again, if you don't want to go too far, maybe just try to get pictures of some cars moving, get the background nice and sharp with the cars blurred. I'll just leave you with one final piece of advice. If you're shooting in a dark situation and you have to use a slow shutter speed, if you use a flash, the flash should actually freeze the picture for you, so you shouldn't have too much trouble. So this might seem really tricky at first, but it is a lot of fun, so stick with it and see what you get. If you have any questions, the community group is always a great way to get in touch with me, and I'll do my best to answer any questions I can, and I'll see you in the next one. Say hello. You're supposed to be asleep, aren't you?